Hi everyone, welcome to another show of Remote Tribe. My name is Andrew Williams. I'm the founder of Remote Tribe. We are a digital nomad blog and a content creator platform for remote workers, digital nomads, and global citizens. And as usual, we try to bring you some really interesting guests. And today I'm joined by Jeremy, who is a veteran living in South America. We did have a lot of shows about Paraguay, especially, but we want to talk now more about the other places like Uruguay, Argentina. And Jeremy is the right person for that because he's been living there for years, and he's actually right now in Paraguay. But we can talk about other things as well. So, Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for being with us, and just give us a short intro about yourself and your
Yeah,
background.
thanks for having me. We've talked about doing this for a while now, so it's nice to finally get
Absolutely.
together and record this. So my name's Jeremy, or Jers. I have been in this digital nomad space for many years now. I just passed the 16-year mark, in fact. So I've been doing this before the term even existed, digital nomad. Just to give you sort of a brief rundown of my story, I'm originally from the United States. My background is in real estate development. I was pretty successful in that pre-2008, mostly in southern United States, Florida. And when the financial crisis occurred, I sort of saw that coming a couple of years before it actually happened and made the decision to get out of the United States, 2007, 2008. So I got out of the business, sold most of the stuff that I had in the United States, and made the decision to go to Latin America. At the time, I did not really have a set plan. I didn't know where I would end up. My original idea was, hey, I'm just going to sort of travel around 6 months, a year, see where it goes. And here I am 16 years later, still going. So sometimes the best experiences in life, it just sort of happens and you just sort of go with it.
Yeah, sometimes you have to take the leap, but also I think you have to prepare a bit financially. I mean, I think you were in a good position where you sold your business, so you were able to travel. And a lot of people don't understand that when they want to become digital nomads, like they just take the leap, but then they don't have any savings. I mean, it's really not. Yeah, obviously there are more remote jobs right now, but it's not really that straight. It's going to take probably a few months to find something or find contracts as a freelancer. So. Yeah, it's good to prepare always. But that's great, Jeremy. I mean, you've been in South America for a while, and why did you choose South America and not maybe Southeast Asia or like south of Europe? What was your main consideration there?
Well, again, this is 2007, 2008. Southeast Asia was just so far away.
Yeah.
I'd heard a lot of good things about South America. I had traveled to Brazil before, loved it. I traveled to Mexico, I'd loved it. And at that time, I thought about going to Europe as well, but the euro was super, super strong. So in those years, actually doing this in Europe would have been very, very expensive. So I said, okay, South America is going to be cheap. It will give me some time. I have money saved, as you talked about, but I definitely want to put something together, create businesses. It's what I always love to do. And so South America just sort of spoke to me. I saw it was up and coming. It was relatively affordable. I thought it would be, adventurous, more so than, say, Europe. And so that's why I ended up starting in South America.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've noticed that a lot of Americans do go to South America. Yeah, I mean, first place is close to home, more or less. It's definitely closer than Europe, I would say. And also, a lot of people in North America now speak Spanish, which is great. So it's much easier to integrate in South. Cool, Jeremy. Okay, that's very interesting to know. So you've seen a lot in South America. Why do you think there's a really big hype about South America in our community right now? Because I think you feel it too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a lot of people who are talking Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina. They're extremely excited about that, and residencies are quite easy to obtain at the moment. Maybe that's one of the reasons why people move there. But why do you think the hype is real, first of all? And second of all, why do you think that is?
So I think a few reasons. One, and again, this was another consideration of mine when I decided to move to Latin America, the time zones. So if you're doing any kind of business that involves either Europe or especially North America, going to Southeast Asia is really off
Yes.
the table unless you want to be working in the middle of the night. So even though when I chose to leave, even though I was no longer doing the real estate, I had some other side projects that I'd already started working on with US clients. I knew that I needed to have a time zone that made sense. So I think that's a big one, time zone, giving you access to both the European market and the US Canadian market. That's a big one. The second, although this is changing somewhat, is the cost of living. South America has been exceptionally cheap over the last number of years. I see the prices increasing rapidly since over the last couple of years since the pandemic. But it's still, as far as worldwide goes, it's still quite affordable. And then, yeah, you touch on this, the residencies. It's fairly easy to, in some countries, you can reside perpetually as a tourist. Not that I would recommend that. But if you want to establish yourself as a legal resident in these countries, South America is really as easy as it gets. In Europe, unless you have an EU passport, it's exceptionally difficult and expensive to get legal residency that lets you stay there more than 6 months.
That is correct. And in Southeast Asia, I looked a lot into this. It's almost impossible to
It's
get
almost
a
impossible.
residency.
So
Yeah.
people go to Thailand and you can be the perpetual tourist and do those tourist runs, but to really establish yourself, stay in the same place, get involved in a community, it becomes exceedingly difficult in Southeast Asia. So I think the residencies are very attractive in Latin America. And then also the path of those residencies to citizenship. I think that's a big consideration for people. Literally, if you're stacking different residencies at the same time, within 5 years, you can have not one, but 2 or 3 different passports from Latin American countries. And it's much easier to do that than I'd say any other region in the world.
Yeah, that sounds about right from my information as well, Jeremy. So that's very interesting to confirm. Did you see a majority of people coming from the US or Europe when we're talking about obtaining residencies? Is there like a niche or like a segment that is definitely a majority in that?
Well, it depends, I'd say, on the country. I think as you go further towards the north, closer to the US, Mexico especially, is primarily people from the United States, and I'll throw Canada into that same group. As you get further down south, I think you get a lot more Europeans. I noticed in Paraguay and in Argentina, a tremendous amount of people from Australia as well seem to gravitate towards what they call the Southern Cone, which are the countries Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would expect also more Europeans due to the obviously the ties that the two countries has, Argentina in Europe and Uruguay in Europe. Like most of the people there have European descent, it's Spanish spoken everywhere. So I think you would integrate just like very fast there because also probably people think a bit more European, I would say, in Argentina.
They think more European, and just the city feels more European.
Exactly.
You walk around Buenos Aires. I was recently spending time in Buenos Aires the last month. It feels like Madrid. It's very similar. The buildings, the architecture, the mentality of the people, all the way around, and just sort of the way the day-to-day living. It's extremely European. And I think as you keep going north, it gets more and more American.
Yeah.
So when you get to Mexico, for example, you have strip malls. It's basically like
North America,
suburban America. Yeah. Everybody has dishwashers, things like that. Whereas as you get into South America, you don't even see dishwasher doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool, very cool. So how's the community in Paraguay, Jeremy, at the moment? So I've heard like there's a lot of expat communities there. Like, do you go to meetups? What's the vibe in Asunción?
I've been to a couple of them. I'm just here for the month. doing some work. I think it's the kind of thing there is. It's a newly developed. For example, I was in Asuncion in 2008, and there were no foreigners at all. There was no development. There were no high rises. And so the city's come a long way in these 15, 16 years. And so, yes, there are definitely foreigners here, but it's not like going to Medellin or Tulum or something like that, where you walk around and they're just expats. They're English speakers everywhere you live. I mean, quite honestly, other than the specific meetups I've had with a few groups or a few individuals here, I haven't seen another foreigner. So you really have to go out of your way, I would say, to look for it, but it is here should you choose to find it.
And it seems it developed a lot, as you're saying, since 10 years ago, for example. Absolutely, yeah. Do you think there is a real need, Jeremy? Like, what's going on? Like, it's definitely like there is a demand for. Are we kind of envisioning that something really bad is coming, like war in the next 10 years? Because it seems like a lot of people are working on these plan Bs. And if there's a demand, it seems like there could be a trend or and now we have a supply as well of people offering these kind of services. Do you think we're heading towards I don't know, some kind of major conflict or?
So I'll give you answer that question in two different ways. I think yes, to an extent. More and more of the world's becoming chaotic. It's become unknown. Just if you watch the news, you're inundated by all these potential world wars that could start and stuff like that. I really honestly feel that if that worst case scenario does happen, this southern cone of South America is the absolute best place in the world to be. And the reason I think that is, the European front is so close to Russia. Anything sort of to the north of Latin America is very close to the US.
Yeah, correct.
And then anything in Southeast Asia is relatively close to China. But this region, especially as you go further south, I think just from a geopolitical standpoint, it's sort of off the stage.
And it's pretty neutral as well. Like even Argentina and Uruguay, they've been. I mean,
Exactly.
not necessarily. Yeah, they've been protected by the geopolitical location and all that stuff. And we've seen it in the past. So people that those are the first countries where people fled in World War II.
Exactly.
So there is a history of that, and yeah, it does make sense. Like also, New Zealand is pretty good as well, but it's it's a US ally, so it's also close to China more or less.
Getting into that Southeast.
Exactly.
I really think this from a worst case scenario, it's going to be the safest place. But do I think there's going to be a worst case scenario? Probably not. I'm more interested in the second thing I'll talk about. So if we look at what happened in the world over the last 5 years with the pandemic, with lockdowns, with travel restrictions, with that sort of thing, I absolutely am of the belief that stuff is going to become the norm, not the exception. So I think how we've lived this last 50 or so years, where everybody takes traveling internationally for granted. You can basically travel very easily without restrictions, without visas. I think that's going to get progressively more and more complicated, and in a worst case scenario, impossible. So
yeah, it's just I don't see it so far. I think I know what you mean, but I was very surprised to see that after the pandemic, the flights were open again and everything went back to normal within a year, basically. So that gave me a lot of optimism. I don't know if there's something coming up, obviously, but if they pulled it once, they can pull it again, and yeah, who knows? Who knows? It's a possibility. I mean, that was just a proof of concept. If you want to take it like
exactly,
that.
that's one way I look at it as a proof of concept. But it's also, if you look at, because I work a lot in the world of helping people get residencies and citizenship, and what I've seen over the last number of years, last say 2-3 years, the requirements for residencies and citizenships are becoming exponentially more difficult. So countries are tightening up the process, and I think there's a limited window where it is still relatively easy in these countries to get different residencies, to get different citizenships. And eventually it might not be possible in the same way.
I agree. I mean, we've seen examples in Europe, in Singapore. These things change, like I would say, once a decade. These programs open and close here and there, so you have to take advantage at the right time. I believe once you get the residency, that's guaranteed pretty much. So that's pretty good. However, the time windows are not necessarily short, but they're limited in most of the cases. Like these programs don't run forever.
Exactly. They continually get more difficult. An example, Mexico, which it's still pretty easy to qualify. This week, they raised the requirements. And by requirement, I mean the amount of money you need to show on a monthly basis to qualify for a temporary residence permit. And things like that happen a lot. If you look at Paraguay, a year and a half, 2 years ago, everybody applied would get permanent residency straight off the bat. And now they've changed it. You have to go through a temporary period before they will give you the permanent residency.
Correct. Yes. And probably there's another next step as soon as they decide that they've given too many. So
Exactly. And then they loosen it up,
cool.
and then it becomes not impossible, but it becomes much
Harder.
more difficult.
Yeah.
Same thing with the citizenships. You know, whether you're talking the citizenship by descent or the investment, let's say the Caribbean islands, the requirements keep getting more and more difficult. I think as more and more people apply, the countries are like, whoa, you know, let's slow down. And so they just make it more difficult. And I think we'll see more and more of that.
Yeah, indeed. Let's keep an eye on the space. It's going to be very interesting. So Jeremy, like you lived a lot in South America. What can you tell us about like the business environment at the moment? Are you bullish on some of the economies like, I don't know, Argentina, Uruguay, even Paraguay? Like what's going on from the opportunity perspective there for investors, small businesses and so on?
So I think I'll take those countries one at a time. Argentina is interesting because there's so much optimism. So many people are going down there, getting residency, thinking of investing, whether it's buying a property, starting a business, because of the excitement and
Sure.
what's happened with the election and with Milei. Personally, I think the upside is huge in Argentina. I think if he's successful in implementing not even all of it, but a good portion of what he's trying to do, the Argentinian economy will boom. And over time, it's not something that's going to happen in a year or two. We're talking 5-10 years.
But the time now is right if things happen in the
future.
future.
The time's right. But it's still, I always tell people, it's such a risky investment because there's at least a 50% chance that he's not going to succeed because the ingrained bureaucracy and the ingrained thinking is going to be very difficult to change and to sort of turn around. So, I'm cautiously optimistic. I certainly wouldn't put a large percentage of net worth into Argentina at this point. Like I tell some clients I work with, if you have a good nest egg, a good portfolio, to take a small percentage and buy a small apartment or something in Argentina, you're willing to take that risk. It's probably worth it. It would pay off. But I certainly would take a substantial portion of my portfolio, our net worth, and invest it in.
Seems like it's not the right time to do big investments. Indeed, yeah.
It's too early. And then moving on to like Paraguay. Paraguay's interesting because I think over the last few years they've had so much foreign investment. You see tons of development. So there is a lot to like. There's a lot of positive aspects of investing in this country. And thus far, the government has been extremely friendly to foreign investors, both through the zero tax incentives, that sort of thing. Now, should that change at any point, that's sort of the risk with Paraguay. If the current government or another government comes in and changes the tax favorability of Paraguay, I think that would overnight negatively impact any investment in the country.
Is Paraguay historically a right-wing country or left-wing country?
It's historically right wing, or has been so for the last 50 years at least.
Okay.
So, and they just had an election this last year. It was closer than it should have been, but the right wing did in end win. So
we have at least 3 more years of stability at least.
through stability and growth. Especially if we're talking about property, there are just some steals to be had here. Price per square meter is lower than pretty much anywhere else, with the exception of maybe Bolivia. So you can really get some nice property, relatively affordable here. And I think, it can be worth taking a look at Paraguay. It's also really good. If you're doing the tax residency here, it can make a lot of sense to say buy a small apartment, because it gives you a strong foot to show, hey, Paraguay is the center of my economic life, which is the justification you need with Spain or with these other countries to show, hey, this tax residency in Paraguay, where I don't actually spend that much time, is in fact the center of my economic life.
Do you think having a property in Paraguay will help you for the citizenship later? Do you think that's a factor?
Absolutely, because so in Paraguay, you need to hold the residency for 3 years before you can apply for the citizenship. But they look at your ties to the country. So there are any number of things you can do, and absolutely, I think owning property is a big one. Something else you could do, you could start a business. And beyond that, they just look at the time you spend in this country. So for a lot of these people who use it as a tax residency and spend little to no time here, they're not going to get the citizenship without doing something like purchasing.
Yes, I mean, it's still great to have the option to get the residency and keep it, and without being there. That's still a great steal, I think. So that's
absolutely.
Great. Yeah, cool. And going down to Uruguay right now. So again, Uruguay, just like a really low-profile country, quite rich, I would say. I know they have some residency and citizenship programs. How about investing in Uruguay? Like, do you have any stories, successful stories on Uruguay investment?
The thing with Uruguay, it's a very stable country. So I would say for banking, the best in all of Latin America are Uruguay and Panama. But because of this stability, the country is very expensive, which means investing in the country is very expensive. And
from what I know, it's also a bit more left-wing. So it's just interjected.
It's a left-wing government. Even though they're left-wing, they are pretty pro-business, which is why the taxation has stayed favorable. They do give incentives should you invest in the country. So they do a lot of things that aren't necessarily associated with the typical left wing. My concern with investing in Uruguay would be the cost relative to what people make. So even though Uruguay is one of, if not the most expensive country in Latin America, the minimum wage is still pretty low. And if you look at the price of an apartment, something like that, it can't be justified based on what the people make. So for that reason, although it's stable, I think it might be overvalued to an extent. So it would not.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
it would be the first place I would look to invest in Latin America.
Cool. Then opening up to Chile. Have you been there lately? What's going on?
I haven't been to Chile in a while. It's relatively stable. It has a good economy. It's a very strong passport, of course, because they're the only one that has the ETSA access, which is almost visa-free to access the United States.
Yeah.
It's a very favorable business environment. Again, though, it's not cheap by Latin America standards, which, to me, if I'm going to invest outside of, say, the United States, outside of Europe, to me, I almost prefer the riskier countries because the upside's so much higher. So
Yeah.
no risk, no worries. If I'm looking at investing in something, and if everything goes well, I'm going to make 8 to 10%. It's just, to me, doesn't make sense to do that in Latin America.
Yeah, your risk appetite is higher, I understand, but yeah, probably your background is also more strong on finding the deals, I would say. So for you, maybe it's easier to spot the good deals.
But I would say even somebody who's pretty risk adverse, if you are that sort of person, I don't think Latin America makes too much sense to invest in, because if you look at somebody who wants a solid 5% return, there's so many places where it's so much safer to do that.
Absolutely.
Even
Yeah, I
the
mean,
most stable countries. So that's why a country like Chile, a country like Uruguay, to me doesn't have much appeal, because you either go to the true first world countries, or you go for something with more risk.
yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, awesome, Jeremy. So, I mean, what would you leave? Like, you've seen quite a lot in South America as an American. Like, what would you say, is a place which is safe, high standard of living, entertaining, good for networking? Which one would you give me a few cities and give me a justification for that?
Because it's a question I get all the time from
Yeah, I'm
clients,
sure.
potential clients. So I answer it almost every day. I don't think there's like one city. So the first question I always ask people, I say, are you a city person? Do
Exactly.
you like the big international, world-class metropolitan city appeal to you? If somebody says yes to that, that's what they're looking for. At the moment, I think hands down the best choice is going to be Buenos Aires. It's extremely affordable. It's a European world-class city, tons of energy, good food, so much to do. Everything you could possibly want in a city, you have there. So I think that's a great option. Outside of Buenos Aires, if somebody doesn't want to be so far down south, or they want other options, it's a big mega city. I think, believe it or not, Bogota is very appealing. It offers a lot. Immediately, people always say, "Oh, but the weather, the traffic." The weather, yeah, the weather's not good. The traffic, just stay in the northern part of the city, and I've been there 6 months at a time, and I've never gotten in a car, because everything you need is walkable. Moving up north even further, Mexico City, although it's gotten much more expensive in the last couple of years,
Sure.
it's still a world-class city that has everything people could possibly want.
So how about then Paraguay and Asunción and some other cities which are not the capital? Like, how would you describe the lifestyle there?
In Asuncion, I would
Yeah,
say Asuncion could work very well for somebody who wants a more laid back, quiet lifestyle. They want access to a few good restaurants, but not the depth you're going to have in a mega city. They want decent shopping, but they don't need the cultural activities, the possibility of things to do in a place like Mexico City or Argentina. So it's much smaller. The description I gave, I went many years ago, in the early 90s. I went to university in Tucson, Arizona. And literally Paraguay feels like Tucson, Arizona in the early 90s. So it's just sort of a place forgotten in time. It really feels like something from a different era. People still use typewriters. Everything just
it's a bit
moves.
romantic. Yeah,
Yeah, but for a lot of people, that's exactly what they're looking for. And for that type of person, somebody who likes that slower environment, likes the personal freedoms, Paraguay could be an ideal choice for that type of person. Just for me personally, I thrive on that big city energy. So for me, I don't think, at least not at this point in my life, it's not where I would want to live full time. I can spend time here, but not, have this as like my primary base.
gotcha.
The other small cities I'll touch on, although it's not so small. I think Medellin is still a good option for a lot of people. Phenomenal weather. I personally lived there for many years. I love the city. At the moment, it sort of has this bad reputation with all the scopolamine
Yeah,
and problems, but most of that is brought on by the people themselves. If you go there with a good head, you don't involve yourself in certain activities, you're not going to have issues.
that's
And
exactly what I've heard as well. Yeah, and there's a lot of entertaining over there. There's a lot of good restaurants, food. I would say decent, decent sized city, but still,
yeah,
keep an
it is
open eye
worth
there.
keeping an eye on.
Yeah,
What other cities will I touch on? I mean, my personal favorite city, especially for beach lovers, is Rio in Brazil. To me, Rio is just a city that has everything. It has that mega city metropolitan vibe. It has really good beaches. It is probably the prettiest city as far as like natural beauty, the setting of any large city anywhere in the world. Again, it has its problems, but I've lived there never for longer than about 7, 8 months at a time. But for various times I have lived there and never had issues there. Again, just being
applying
sort of
common sense. Yeah,
using my head. Um, a lot of people, another city that, of course, is very popular with the digital nomad crowd, Florianopolis. I was there a few months back, not my personal favorite place um,
why is
because
that, Jeremy?
it doesn't have walkability. So to me, it's very spread out, and a car, unless you are just a person who can basically stay home, go to the beach, you don't have the need for a lot of different things.
You do mean
You
you need a mean of transport everywhere, which is kind of sucks. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's beautiful, it's safe, it does have a lot going for it, but was just not one of my favorite places. And there's so many like smaller cities in Brazil and in other parts of Latin America, cities like Cali, Bucaramanga, Pereira in Colombia that are great affordable options for people who like the smaller cities. So again, it's really what do you like? What are you looking for? And for almost everybody, once they answer those questions, there's a city that it might not be a perfect city for them, but it's a great starting point, at least.
I would say try to explore all of these cities if you can. If you're working remotely or you have an online business, just go there, get the vibe, and then obviously you can talk to Jeremy or some other people about residencies and solving out, eventually even a citizenship. So, Jeremy, where can people get in touch with you if they want to understand more about South America and how to get the legal papers there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty active on the social medias, mostly on Twitter or X as it's now called. My handle is the Jerz Way, spelled Jerz, sort of the nickname I go by. So the Jerz Way. And then you can also find me on my website, which is thejerzway.com, the same thing. And
Fantastic.
then it lists most of the services I offer. I do consultations, residencies, citizenships, business formations, tax strategies, which sort of combines all of this.
That's great. Great, Jeremy. Thanks a lot for sharing all these tips with us. I'm definitely going to leave all the links in the description so people can get in touch with you. We're going to leave our links as well from Remote Tribe. We have a lot of content on the location independent lifestyle, which I think a lot of people love. And I hope to see you soon. I'm wishing you all the best there in Paraguay and Argentina. Fingers crossed, Argentina is becoming great soon because it's a great place. To be honest, I really, really loved it there, and we're very excited about the news that are coming from Argentina. So good luck with all the business, and then I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks for having. This was
Take
fun.
care.
Take care.
Likewise. Bye bye.
Ciao, ciao.